So, welcome to Supporting Our Siblings, Managing a New Normal. I'm Lauren Mirsky-Piatkin, and I'm a child life specialist and a grief counselor. I've been doing it for like almost 15 years, I guess. In Florida, I just was recently for the last 6.5 years in Qatar in the Middle East at a women and children's hospital. And I'm back now, and I'm married, and I have a son and a 17-year-old puppy. Always my baby.
Awesome. And I'm Sarah Stoney. I'm the social worker at the Leukodystrophy Dystrophy Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I've been there and with the center for about 10 years. And I too am married. I also have a fur baby who's old and grouchy, but he's fun. And we also have to recognize Kat Rudnick. She is also a child life specialist who really helped in the development of these slides and the material that we're going to be presenting you today. So thanks everyone for joining, and we hope that you're able to kind of really identify this. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Okay. I hope that you've brought with you some expectations of what you hope that we go over today. Before we get started, I'd like everyone to just kind of pause and check in with themselves and kind of identify any expectations you may have about today's discussion, any expectations you may have about what you're hoping to get out of today's talk, and just kind of a little bit about where your mind may be at. I say this because we're going to be covering some difficult topics today. We're going to be covering a lot of topics really around the care of our unaffected siblings as it relates to the disease courses of leukodystrophies. And we want to be mindful that everyone is taking care of themselves. So if at any point in time you feel as though the conversation is just too much, or you feel as though it's just getting a little too heavy, give yourself permission to hit pause and step away or step out, and you can revisit it later if needed. Okay.
So we know every child is different. That's a blanket statement, right? But the other part that we really want to mention is when you think about it, you have unaffected siblings that, or any child for that matter, you've got the overachievers, you have kiddos that are having challenges, and you've got everybody in between. It's a whole continuum. So we want to make sure that we recognize everyone, not just on this end, not just on that end. So everybody matters. Everybody is different. And we want to make sure that we honor that.
Okay.
So now we have a list. So this is what we call the common, I would say the common behaviors of unaffected siblings that we have seen, that Sarah and I have seen, and Kat. Isolating. When we're isolating, we're hiding in our room. We're not wanting to talk to anyone. We're kind of doing that, putting your head in the sand kind of a feeling. Depression. Depression can affect a lot of people in different ways, different ages, different stages. Denial. You know what? This is not happening. I don't feel like believing that this is happening to me. This is not happening to my family. Developmental regressions. This can happen at any age. You start to see baby talk, separation anxiety. Maybe you have an affected sibling who used to enjoy hanging out with their friends, and now I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay with my family. Constipation and diarrhea. So we know a lot of us, many of us, when stress happens, it manifests in our stomach. We get stomach aches, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting. These are common. That happens to lots of us. Anger. Anger is a big one. Why is this happening? I'm mad at the world. I'm mad at God. I'm mad at the doctors. I'm mad at my parents. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at my sibling. These are common feelings. Grades dropping in school and loss of motivation. You know what? I don't feel like doing this anymore. Why should I? You know, a lot of things are happening in my home. I've had enough. Overachieving. We have the opposite. I'm going to be amazing. I'm going to do anything that will make my parents happy. I'm going to do all the chores without them asking. I'm going to get the best grades in the world. I'm going to fix the world. And mom and dad don't have to worry. Irritability. Anything sets them off. Maybe they don't like the way that the dinner plate looks. Maybe it's the way that someone talked to them. It's things that never bothered them before, now bother them. Loss of interest in favorite activities. Maybe they used to play soccer. They used to, they love to play the piano. They love music, hiking, anything. And now, I don't feel like it. Embarrassment. So this one, a lot of times we don't talk about this, but this happens. Kids are mean at school sometimes. We all know that in the regular days. And maybe my sibling looks different. My sibling is in a wheelchair. My sibling walks differently, talks differently. And kids hear things, they make assumptions, they make fun of, and the unaffected sibling gets embarrassed. Experimenting with risky behavior. This happens as well. Plenty of drug abuse, eating disorders, etc. And then also resentment and jealousy. You know what? My mom and dad are not paying attention to me anymore because my brother or sister is in the hospital, my brother or sister is sick. These are common feelings or siblings or behaviors. It's not an exhaustive list at all. And so if there's other ones that you guys have noticed in your household, I ask if you'd like to share. We can add this to our list for future. If anybody wants to let us know. Oh yeah, please. Guilt. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah. Guilt's a good one too, because I
It's a
think that
really good one.
there's a sense of sometimes of, particularly with smaller children and even in adolescence of, did I cause this? Did I do this? Am I taking too much time away from mom and dad? Is what I'm doing, are my needs less important now? Maybe they are. Maybe they're more important. All of that gets worked in. It's a great one.
Absolutely. Really good point. Why me? Exactly. Exactly. Did I wish that when I got mad at my sister or brother? Gee, I wish that would happen. And it happens, no fault of theirs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Good point. Thank you.
Okay. So in figuring out how we wanted to provide you with tools today, we thought that it best to talk about how we support unaffected siblings or family members throughout the disease progression. And we selected different moments or points in time as to where we feel as though it may be even more important to be observant of what some of those behaviors may be that we'll see. So we'll start today's discussion at the time of diagnosis and then move on through the loss of significant moments, events, anniversaries, different family traditions, the loss and the grief of their siblings' function. Also talk about as skilled nursing and palliative care is brought into the home and how that affects our homes, which is the safe haven for so many of our unaffected siblings and family members. And then sadly, as their siblings do die, how do we build on that legacy? And I want to actually end this slide with kind of focusing on that despite how heavy a lot of these topics will be that we're going to cover today, that truly having your entire family, unaffected members, unaffected siblings be a part of the legacy that you're building is a really beautiful thing. So we hope that these tools that we give you today will kind of help provide some examples and also be able to kind of walk through what you may see at these different points in time. So at time of diagnosis, I oftentimes get asked by families, when do I start getting help for my son's sister or my sister's, or I'm sorry, for my my son's brother or my other child? And the answer is as soon as possible, really. And that may look very different in a lot of different realms. It looks different based on the age. It looks different based on where that person is developmentally. And also taking into account that we understand that you as parents are the experts on all of your children. So by taking the cues from the child and by taking the cues from yourself, you knowing just how much information to share and how. But that's key. Um, there is a lot of benefit to being honest, but being honest in developmentally appropriate ways. So this does not mean having genetic discussions at age 6, which I don't understand as a non-medical professional, but learning a way to describe what body differences are, maybe what is different between the siblings, but figuring out ways to describe that in very developmentally appropriate ways. Validating feelings is extremely important. So understanding that children feel as though that when they do express emotion, whether it be some of those things that we saw on one of the first slides, whether it's anger or crying or being upset, that we acknowledge that that is incredibly valid and that what they're experiencing is very difficult. Acknowledging and empathizing the changes that they're going through. We know that with these diseases that our children change over time. And sometimes those changes are slow and sometimes they're fast. And just to appreciate and understand that everyone in the family is observing those same changes and maybe processing those changes much differently. So to just be aware and observant of that and normalizing feelings that when you are able to cry and your son or your daughter sees you cry, acknowledging that that's a normal feeling and that it's okay to express emotion and grief. That's also going to validate and normalize that for that child. And introducing therapy for all members, including children. I think it's tough to talk to a child life specialist and a social worker without us bringing up how important mental health therapy is, but it truly, truly is. And I like that we put this at the beginning because I I appreciate how important that relationship is between a therapist and a client. And anyone who's been in mental health therapy knows that that relationship is built over time. And particularly if you're someone that finds it difficult to open up, or if you're dealing with a child who may be a little bit younger, that that relationship is going to require a significant amount of work. So introducing that support as early as possible just gives that relationship time to blossom. And the reason why that's important is that because when these moments, we go back, when these moments happen, you'll already have a support person in place who has a relationship with the person that can carry them through these. Um, Instead of waiting for perhaps a decline in function or a event or a specific occurrence that happens that causes acute grief, kind of already having a support system in place so that you're not trying to work backwards. You're working more proactively instead of reactively. All right.
Right. So as we continue along this progression, we talk about the loss of significant moments. So we have things like birthdays, holidays, recitals, vacations. These now look different. What they looked like before has now changed. What kids were able to do before, maybe the affected sibling is unable to do. We see this and we call it part of the grief process. The unaffected siblings are grieving what once was, what they saw their siblings be able to do before, and now what has changed. There's different anniversaries of difficult moments. Maybe it's 1 year ago we had a diagnosis. Maybe it's, today is his or her birthday, and now they're not with us anymore. These are part of the progression as we move along. So as the affected siblings' function changes, we continue with the understanding of this grief process. They, the unaffected sibling may feel, okay, my brother and sister were able to run and play with me, and now they're not. Or my mom was pregnant with this baby that I was expecting to be this child that's going to grow up and play with me, but they can't. This is changing, their expectations are evolving, they're changing. We need to also understand the negative feelings that sometimes happen with unaffected siblings. They're not trying to be mean, they're just expressing and experiencing something that is different and new, and their life is turned upside down. And then also recognizing the impact that this has with the relationship with their peers. We talked about embarrassment, we talked about the changes when kids tend to isolate or not want to hang out with their friends anymore. Sometimes you'll have a large group of friends, and now they have just maybe one or two that understand what they're experiencing. And so the relationship with those peers changes. The rest of the kids, life goes on. They're continuing on with the things that they need to do.
And just to piggyback on that, I think that's also something that we feel even harder in the rare disease community, that a lot of the diseases that our families are faced with, a lot of people haven't heard of. So it's very difficult for a child to kind of explain that to one of their peers, because they're using words they've never heard of. They're describing diseases they've never heard of. So it just further kind
Yeah.
of brings on that isolation.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about having outsiders come into your home. But before we do that, I want to kind of define these three groups to make sure too that we understand the distinction between the three. So skilled nursing is medical care or treatment brought into your house by a local agency. So probably one of the first new people, I would say, that's introduced to the house. So a new face, this person's usually in a uniform wearing scrubs, so clearly identified as a medical professional that can say to a young person, is something wrong? Why are the doctors here? I thought we went to go see the doctors. And there's even moments when you're bringing people into the home where you can still incorporate unaffected family members. A perfect example of this, that I encourage the entire family to interview skilled nurses that you're interviewing for your family. Let them be a part of the interview process. Let them ask questions, so that they're already building that relationship and being able to formulate some trust. Palliative care, specialized care focusing on pain management, stress relief, and improving quality of life, regardless of expectation. This also can be provided in and out of the home. We have a palliative care team, an excellent palliative care team at CHOP that follows patients while they're in the hospital, when they go to doctor's appointments, but also has services that they can provide in the home. So now the team's getting bigger. Now we've got more strangers coming into the home, because with that may come with additional therapists or other medical providers, even chaplaincy or child life specialists. So more faces, more people to learn. And then lastly, hospice. Hospice is specialized care mainly aimed to provide comfort and dignity to patients by providing physical comfort, emotional, social, spiritual support for people that are nearing end of life. And this team is also large, so more faces in the home. So more introductions, more relationships. And while oftentimes people associate hospice with being at very acute end of life, we know that with the Affordable Care Act, children are actually able to have hospice services for quite some time with concurrent care. And then an additional, hospice services may last for a long time. So these are not short services. These are people that may be in and out of your home for quite some time. So just understanding and appreciating how that may be affecting unaffected family members. So we've covered some of this, but we're really highlighting the fact that their safe place is being dismantled. We often hear from parents that the acting out behaviors, some of those behaviors we saw at the first slide, well, they're not doing this at school, they're just doing it at home. They're paying attention and they're listening to their teachers, but at home, they're really acting out. That's because that's their safe place. They're acting their most authentic self, and they're being their most vulnerable and their most themselves at the place where they feel the safest. So that is their home. So when we bring people into the home, we have to understand that this isn't just four walls and a ceiling, that this is truly their home, which is their their place to be safe and to be themselves. Take the time to explain who and what is new bringing into the home. So, with new people, that can also bring in new equipment, new machines, new sounds, new smells, all sorts of uh, new things coming into this place that has been the safe place for so many of these kiddos. So just understanding and taking the time to pause and ask questions, letting kids understand what a machine may do, if they ask questions, to answer questions, but to make sure that they're involved as much as they want to be in kind of adjusting to what is changing inside the home. Taking cues from siblings and allowing as much engagement as they want, but not pushing it either. Doing things on their timetable and really just leaving that door open. So I always tell families that when I get asked, how do I even start this conversation with my child? I think one of the best prompts, which our child life specialist often tells families, is just start by asking them a question by saying, hey, I know that this new person has been coming in and there's a new machine. Do you know what that machine does for for your sister? And gauging what they know in order to better direct and give you the next steps as to where to take that conversation. Continuing to monitor behavior, obviously, for additional signs. As we talked about those behaviors in the beginning, that's a continuum. And we expect that sometimes we're going to have good days and good days, good months and some bad months, and always to just be able to identify when that time is needed and then use available supports. I can't speak highly enough about child life specialists, but they are medically trained to help explain very complicated medically complicated things to children in very developmentally appropriate ways. So if there is a question that you have, or you say, you know what, I really want to be able to explain this to my son, but I don't have the words to use, or I don't know how to explain what a G tube is, they will be able to give you the tools or the language, or be able to engage in that conversation with you.
Okay, so now a little bit deeper of a subject. Um, as the affected sibling declines, we tend to see more hospitalizations, more frequent hospitalizations, or longer hospitalizations. With this comes the sometimes less access to one or both parents. At the same time, there's also less access to the affected sibling. And sometimes that could be the visitation guidelines of the hospital. It could be, depending on how sick the child is, or also based on your family's um, needs or beliefs or feelings as to what you want or when you are comfortable with having the unaffected siblings come to bedside. With these in place, what happens is they have less access to accurate information. They depend on you guys, mom and dad, for as much accurate information as they can get. And sometimes when we take that part out, then there's less access. So we don't want them getting onto inappropriate or the wrong websites on, on when Googling, you can go deep. Also, when something happens that's a normal, anything that you're in your routine in your life and something goes whoop, and flips it upside down, your safety and security changes as well. And this happens in the same manner. When the affected sibling dies, these services such as skilled nursing, palliative care that were in your home that Sarah was mentioning are now leaving. This can sometimes have the effect of making the unaffected siblings feel like their affected sibling has been erased. It's that feeling of, well, everyone was here and now they're gone. My sibling is gone. And it gives that feels like that they're feeling that way. The changes in their space. This was where my sibling was, and now my sibling is not there anymore. It's important during this time that we recommend that you guys participate in your family practices, whatever that is, your rituals, your traditions, whatever you choose to do. in this type of situation. And then preparing the siblings appropriately, developmentally appropriately explaining to them what is happening, what will happen, what are the plans for your family. You guys can do that. Child life specialists can help. Social workers can help as a process through this. And then also expressing grief together. Everyone expresses grief differently. Everyone copes differently. But if you're able to do it together, it really helps process and support each other as you move through this journey. So this is actually one of my favorite subjects in the sense that where Sarah was mentioning in the beginning, this is a very deep and difficult subject, but can also be made as beautiful as we can. And honoring the siblings' legacy is really important. And it's done in so many ways. So sometimes what we first see is the behaviors that we talked about in the beginning. Maybe they've now evened out, but then something like this happens, and sometimes you'll see behaviors resurface, and we can walk with the sibling and help them. Giving updates to the unaffected siblings, coaches, teachers, guidance counselors. These people need to know what has happened. You don't have to tell them the whole story, but just so that they're aware, so that when these kids are coming back to school, when they're playing sports or taking classes, they're seeing any kind of changes, if there's any type of behavioral changes or anything that they need. Also, very important to model healthy coping. I know that can go in different directions, but um, it's important that, giving each other hugs, talking together, being open, giving your kids an open door to express whatever they feel, not letting them have to worry that if they say something, they're going to upset you. Cry together, spend time together. So the last part here is talking about the actual legacy building. So when someone is at the beginning of their diagnosis, there's many things that one can do. If a child is older, some kids will do like their 3 wishes of how they want to be remembered, writing notes to their family members, talking, expressing their feelings. On top of that, you can also do handprints together. You can also do memory boxes, planting a tree. These are things that honor the legacy of the child and what they loved. And I do have a story. When I was working in, sorry, I know it's a difficult subject. When I was working in Florida, well, when I was living in Florida the first time, I had a patient that was a cardiac patient, and she was a huge fan of Coldplay. And they were coming to Tampa at the time. And she had purchased tickets along with her whole family. Anyway, she became unexpectedly very, very sick. So her best friend wrote a letter to the manager of Coldplay and said, "Hey, my friend is a huge fan. And could you please, when you come to Tampa, please dedicate this one particular song to her?" Fix You was her favorite song. And they did. They did. They had a big sign that said, "This is to Leanne, and we dedicate the song to you." And it was on YouTube. It was everywhere. It was awesome. So ever since then, I've been a fan. Um, but there are different little things that matter that you can do to honor these kids in the most beautiful way possible.
Even as simple as just to touch on that, I have a family whose child is unfortunately no longer here, but loved this one song by I think it was Justin Timberlake. They couldn't stand it. The whole family couldn't stand it. And this child just listened to the song like on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. So that their way to honor him is that every single time that song comes on the radio, they listen to it. They don't change it. They have to listen to it in its entirety to honor him. So it's so individualized as to how we remember these children and remember these relationships, that it can be big or small or personal or public, that there's really no rules when it comes to legacy building. So we're going back to these behaviors. We won't go through them again, but if anything has come up for anyone where they feel as though there are other things or other symptoms that they feel like they'd like to talk about, feel more than welcome to do so. One of the important things that I want to take away, that I'd like you to take away from today, is that when you see these things going on in healthy siblings, healthy family members, it does not mean that anyone is doing a bad job. These are what we call normal behaviors of siblings. Normal behaviors of siblings. That when you see these symptoms in your child, it does not mean that you failed in any way, that you didn't do something that you were supposed to do, that you missed a memo. There is no class or course on caring for a family when a child is diagnosed with leukodystrophy. We're all figuring it out. Our doctors are figuring it out. Our families are. So when you see these things, it does not mean that there is anything wrong. All this does is it sets off a little notification. You know what? I think I've noticed that my son's not doing great, or I've noticed that he's more angry or he's isolating. And maybe that just prompts you to do the next step. And remember, we talked about this being cyclical. Like we're going to see these symptoms over and over again. And at no point in time does that ever mean that someone's dropping the ball. That's not what this is. That this is just normal coping for a very, very tragic situation. Okay.
So we have put together a list of resources for you. Again, not exhaustive.
Can't talk to a social worker without giving resources.
That's right. And randomly things with child life specialists. But anyway, so camps. There are camps in your respective states, and you can talk with or check with your social worker or child life specialist, are usually the two that usually know about the camps that are set up for siblings, and many times as well as patients as well. So it kind of depends, and you can check that out. Also, support groups, you'll find those online, you'll find those in person. Again, your medical community can assist you with that. Sib shops is one of them. Sarah's the sib shop lady. Books. So we call it bibliotherapy. It's one of my favorites because I used to be called I called myself the book pusher. But we have a lot of developmentally appropriate books that talk about the grief process. These are 3 examples here: The Invisible String, Tear Soup, The Kissing Hand. Invisible String is one of my personal favorites. I like to make it come to life. And also another one that's really good is When Dinosaurs Die, which is a fantastic book. It's an interesting name, but it's all done in cartoons, and it actually addresses everything. It even has a part in the back, like near the end of the book, that talks about actually funerals to explain to children. And I think it's one of the only children's books I've ever seen that actually addresses these subjects. Well, there's child life specialist grief counselors. That's me. I am doing this work online, so I'm happy to support anyone. This is my email address. There are others, I'm sure, but just letting you know about me. Wish organizations, we all know about Make-A-Wish Foundation, and as I understand, I believe they're talking today. But there are also smaller organizations within your communities that also grant wishes. And what happens is a lot of times is the sibling, the affected child will have a wish, and almost always the whole family is part of that. So, and then lastly, and very importantly, mental health professionals. I think we've talked about this several times. They're really important: psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, all really, really important. And one of the things that I think is really important about them is, while it's great to talk to your family members, your aunts, your uncles, whoever will listen, which is wonderful, it's also really good to have a non-biased point of view. It's not somebody that you have to worry will go and tell your cousin or whatever, your long lost family member, but at the same time, it's someone that can just hear you and help you process, or help the kids process.
Lauren, I'm going to tell them the funny story I told you earlier. So I have a teenage patient who was one of my patients at CHOP who's been telling me that he's talking to someone. When I said, like, are you seeing a counselor? Are you seeing a therapist? Yes, I'm talking to somebody. I'm talking to somebody. So that's what I've been documenting. And then all of a sudden, I got a message that said, I would like to see a therapist. And I said, what's going on? He has a therapist. Something must have happened. Okay, cool. So I reach out to my patient and I said, hey, I thought you were talking to somebody. What happened? And he's like, oh, nothing. And I was like, well, where's that person? And he said, oh, that's my mom. And I was like, so your mom can't be your therapist or counselor. Like she absolutely, like, he's like, but I talked to her and I feel better. And I was like, that's amazing.
That's
But
good. That is
we
good.
also need to get you a therapist.
Now it's documented in the chart forever.
Yeah, like social worker did not identify the therapist at hand. But yeah, like, and like, that's fantastic. But we obviously always need additional support, particularly. And also, you know, along with being non-biased, they're professional, that they oftentimes, there are counselors and therapists out there that are trained to work specifically in grief and also working with family members of people with chronic illness. So they exist in the community.
I was going to say, sorry. And
Sure.
I'm not sure if this is right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you're also getting mental health professionals for kids, right, then you really have to check who will see kids, right? Because isn't there cutoffs?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
there's, and also different modalities too. So like, obviously, if we're looking for someone for, let's say, a 6-year-old boy, we're going to look at the types of modality that the therapist does, because a 6-year-old isn't going to engage in psychotalk therapy, right? That's going to be a short session. But they may engage with a child life specialist. They may engage with somebody who's professional, who's professionally trained in play therapy. So there are activities for every stage. Really connect with your team social worker or physician as with recommendations. This is a very boring slide just about how to actually get a therapist. It's tough. We're in a mental health crisis in this country, and it's very tough to get mental health resources. If you'd like to go through your insurance, either calling or using the website is absolutely helpful. I often use Psychology Today. If you've never heard of them, it's kind of like Google for therapists, and it's pretty reliable. You can type in your zip code. You can even identify like what your insurance is, what you want to be seen for. If you want them to do a specific modality like CBT or play therapy, you can indicate those on the website, and it should give you some valid recommendations. And I have Ask Your Pediatrician, but honestly, this is really dedicated to ask your disease community, ask your neurologist, ask your social worker, ask your PCP for recommendations. I always feel like the best recommendations come from people who have who know you and know your child and know what it is that you're seeking care for. So by all means, ask your medical care team, ask your disease community as to who they think can help. Okay, and I think that ends our presentation. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, we'd love to kind of make this a little bit more informal and hopefully obviously take time for questions and answers. And if not, we have some questions that we think can kind of start some conversations, but we're here for you all. So please let us know how we can best help you. Any questions on anything we talked about?
Mhm.
Awesome.
Ah, very good.
Do you know when that is, Marley? Got it.
Okay.
Please ask at registration. Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Marley. Any other
Any
questions?
questions from you guys? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
but we
Yeah.
know people who do. So ask your social worker. But yes, I mean, and I think that that's the beauty of what I loved so much about working with Lauren and Kat on this project is that they're both trained as child life specialists. And anyone who's worked with us, I mean, I can't speak highly enough about them. I think they're really the psychosocial key component for our pediatric patients and their siblings, in terms of just ensuring resources and giving prompts. A lot of times too, sometimes it's as little as just giving them direction on how to start conversations, or a book to read to start a conversation. A lot of those ideas come from our child life specialist team. So they're definitely available.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi.
Oh, hi, Aunt.
Hi. Mm,
That's a big fear.
yeah. Yeah. That's a totally normal fear to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these days also you find that even when they're 8 or 7, these days you're finding that a lot of kids are, the access to the internet
Mm,
is huge, and just really having a handle on what they're Googling um, is really important, because anybody, I can give you the name of something and you're just gonna, I'm gonna start looking. I mean, we do that as adults, right? We tell people, don't look up your diagnosis. You might find something, that's not correct. So it's important to do that too, because they know.
mhm. I think it's a testament too to how stinking smart kids are. And they're really resilient too. And I, of course, can empathize with families and parents, and caregivers who want to shield and protect them as much as humanly possible. Oftentimes we find though that information is actually power, and that answering questions in honest, developmentally appropriate ways actually brings some peace and relief to some of the fears of the unknown.
Mhm.
So just by engaging in those conversations, and again, if this is not something that you've done or something that you've struggled with, I really love engaging in just questions to the kiddos
Mhm.
and asking, like, do you know why Susie goes to the doctor? Like, do you know, like, can you tell me what you think is like to gauge how much they know already? Because first of all, I think it'll surprise you how much they know.
They know a
Um,
lot.
and then that leads to also an explanation of things. I had a family once that um was very proactive in having these conversations. And then ultimately, when they sat down with their, I think he was 6 or 7 at the time, and started to have a more detailed discussion about how their brains were working differently and what was going on, um, they were so thankful because he thought it was contagious. And he thought like his fear, like his biggest fear, the thing that was, he was seeing all the behaviors, like he was acting out and so scared and expressing so much fear. It was because he was worried that that was going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And so literally just taking that out of the equation and providing education decreased that anxiety so much that it just left the door open for so much more healing. Yes.
Mhm.
Mm. Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mhm. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so
that's beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah.
I like that.
And I'm a tangible, I like object person myself. So I love that idea. And we think about just like human development overall. Like we think about security blankets and stuffed animals. Like they play a really big role in life as we go through things. They are associated with a lot of memories. And I love the idea of something tangible that I think that just adds to the legacy building. It's
Oh, yeah.
beautiful.
We can create lots of things. Seen through, yeah.
Yeah. We, Mhm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Many times also called the forgotten ones. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And uh, that's the important part, is really recognizing, that they're an important part of the family. They're a sibling. They're not this person off to the side. But so
Mhm.
many times it happens where somebody is, maybe mom and dad are so busy taking care of their child, whether it's in the hospital or so, when they're in the hospital or something like that. And so it's not that no one's trying to be mean. No one's trying to miss that person. It's just that they have to focus.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we do see the glass children or
Mhm.
the forgotten ones.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
story because
I
I
know
feel
it's
like
hard.
it really highlights just, it um one of the things that I'm talking about later on is when help is not always helpful. Like when
Yeah.
people are trying to do nice things but they miss the mark and how
Mhm.
challenging that can be. And that's a perfect example of that where, oftentimes we have sometimes unaffected siblings do get missed and it's not malicious. It
No.
just happens. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I have as Lauren mentioned, I am one of the facilitators at Children's Hospital Philadelphia's Sib Shops program. So Sib Shops it's a national program. There's not chapters, but there's Sib Shops all over the place. And it's a support group that's held every other month. So it's really low commitment, I feel like, for families because their schedules are already so busy. And what happens during SIP shops is we have split unaffected siblings into 3 groups. So we have what we call the littles, which are like primary school age, then we have middle schoolers, and then we have high schoolers. So child life specialists meet with the unaffected siblings of those 3 groups, while simultaneously social workers meet with the parents of the kiddos. So no affected siblings are there. It's purely a time that's just for siblings and their parents. I had the pleasure last month, we were down a child life specialist. So our child life specialist group is a facility dog and a child life specialist, so he could not step in. So I had the pleasure of running the teen group last month, and as I've heard, it's really interesting to just hear the conversations that go on amongst these teenagers because they're just teenagers. They want to talk about the music that they like, what they're wearing to prom, and these are oftentimes, if prompted, when we go into conversations about their affected sibling, It's oftentimes very much diverted away from that, because what has been shared with us is that, well, that's all we all talk about. That's oftentimes, they're always the center of conversation. They're always the one getting talked about. So we give them this space where they are able to just be a teenager with other teenagers. And I think that it's extremely helpful. And once in a blue moon, they bring something to group that is directed on of something like from their affected sibling, but oftentimes it's conversation they steer away from. And it's because they feel as though that child sometimes monopolizes things.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, sure.
Um, when an unaffected sibling is showing these behaviors, what is your recommendation to the parent? Like, how do you handle, if they are acting out or showing behaviors that like you have to address because it's still like inappropriate? Like, what do you tell parents to do out of curiosity?
Yeah. You want to start?
Sure. Well, okay, so I think there's a lot of layers to that. So the parent knows their child the best, right? So it's going to also depend on what they need. I think part of that is trying to understand the reason for the behavior. So sometimes we use words, adults use words that kids hear and misinterpret. So first is understanding what that means, and then answering the question or processing with them. Sometimes it's something's happening at school, they're getting made fun of, and they're acting out because they don't want to share that. They don't want to bother their parent. So it's then finding out what is happening. And then, if in certain situations, offering to go and talk to the teacher or the administration or the parents of the other child if there's something of that nature. If it's, they're extremely irritable for it, well, all of a sudden everything is bothering them. Again, it's trying to find what is the root of that. This is going to sound strange, but I'm kind of going there. I had a patient, it was a different diagnosis, but I had a patient that got hurt with a dumbbell at the gym. Okay. The child was a teenager and absolutely acting out in the room, full on screaming, shouting, yelling, arms flailing, the whole thing. The doctor walked out as I was walking in. She's like, "You need to help her. You need to fix this." Well, come to find out that what the doctor had said to her, because in certain times we talk to people and we say, "Oh, we're just gonna, let's say for instance, I'm gonna pop into this house, right? I'm just gonna walk in." It's just another way of speaking. This doctor had said to her, "Well, in order to get the indentation out, we're just gonna put a balloon in there and pop the indentation out." So in her head, she's thinking, "You're gonna stick a balloon in my head and pop it?" When that was explained to her properly, she was fine. Oh, okay. So sometimes I think the biggest thing is getting to the root of the problem. What is happening? Is it that the child is feeling left out, forgotten? Maybe no one's coming to their soccer games anymore. We need to address that. Can you go once a week? Can maybe mom or dad, so that one can be with the affected child and one of the others can go with the child, or taking them on a dinner date, a movie date. So it's the bottom line is really trying to figure out the why, and then how to get to the what. Mm-hmm. Does that answer that?
Mm-hmm. That's also so much more eloquent than I was going to say.
Sorry, I'm very wordy.
No, it's good. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like action, like action in some, like do your best not to ignore, like do your best to just acknowledge, to see it and to take action, whether that action is trying to get to the root of it, whether it's comfort, whether it's empathy or validation. Because sometimes making those bigger changes may take time, but there is some action that we can do when we see this that can still provide like a sense of comfort. So if nothing else, because again, we understand that these situations, they're not just stressful for siblings. Like you as a parent and a caregiver are going through this too. So that may be really hard. And I feel like it's a big enough ask that to just pause and try to take some action, even if it's small, even if it's just a validation, even if it's just like an acknowledgement, just to do something, instead of trying to maybe push it aside or to maybe reason it out that it could be nothing.
Okay. Good question. Yes, ma'am. Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, the one benefit that I think did come out of the pandemic is that we've learned how to do a lot of things virtually. And virtual online therapy, mental health professionals, Lauren can see anyone in any state. Like the access to be able to do that is truly it's truly a gift. So the options and possibilities are here now than they've ever been before. So it can allow us to connect in ways that weren't otherwise possible before.
That is true. One good thing that came out of that.
Yeah. I actually realize we're at time.
We
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.